today we have another St. Francis graduate. We have Robert Rahn here with his partner Kim Anklin. Robert and Kim are private investigators. Robert graduated from St. Francis College in what year, Robert? Sorry? 76. He was a sociology major, so I'm sure that will be very exciting to many of you who are studying sociology and criminal justice. He's now a very successful private investigator. He and his partner Kim, they'll talk a little bit in general about their work, but mostly they're going to talk today about a very special case they worked on that resulted in freeing a wrongfully convicted man from prison. The man, Jonathan Fleming, is here with us today. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone.
Jonathan spent 2 decades in prison for a crime he did not commit. And after Robert and Kim talk about their work and what they did to help free him, he's going to talk a little bit about his experience. And we're so lucky to have all 3 of them today, especially Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is one of the first times you've spoken to a group of students, right? He's been on the news, but he hasn't spoken to a group like this. So I know you'll be very respectful and kind and encouraging, because it's pretty scary the first time you do this. All right, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're all here today. And enjoy the lecture.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Rahn, and I would like to thank all of you for attending this class. I would also like to thank Professor Horowitz for inviting us to be here and allowing us to speak with you. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be here. As Professor Horowitz said, St. Francis College is my alma mater. I enrolled here as a full-time student in 1971. I received my associate's degree in criminal justice in
Can everybody hear? Yes. Okay.
In 75, and then I got my bachelor's degree in sociology in 76. During that time, though, between the time I enrolled and the time I graduated, I got called to attend the police academy. So I had to stop as a full-time student here, and I became a part-time student. And it was through the efforts of Dr. Edna O'Hearn, who was at that time the chairperson for the sociology department. She was the one that encouraged me to stay on here and not drop out, and to keep going as a part-time student while I was attending the police academy. So for her, I would like to thank her for helping me get through that difficult time. I spent 20 years in the police department. I started out as a uniformed police officer, and I worked my way up to detective, and then I took the promotional exams, and I went to sergeant and then lieutenant. I retired from the police department in 1993, and in 1994 I started Management Resources, which is a private investigative firm. It's a full-time private investigative company. We're licensed in New York and New Jersey, and we assist primarily attorneys. Attorneys are most of our clients, and we provide investigative services for criminal defense as well as civil investigations. Thank you. But that's enough about me. Let me talk about the case a little bit and about Jonathan. Jonathan Fleming's family first contacted Kim and I in 2012. We received a telephone call from a family member, and they asked us if we were interested in conducting a wrongful conviction investigation. And they explained a little bit about the circumstances behind the case, and I told them we would be interested. They were very, very leery, though, about hiring another private investigative firm, because in the past they had hired, over the years trying to get Jonathan out of jail, they had hired other investigators. And basically these investigators promised them the world, but the bottom line was they couldn't produce. They said there was nothing that they could do to help the family to get him out. So they were kind of leery about hiring us. They came to us through an internet search, a Google search, and they called us up. And I have to give them credit because they vetted us over the phone before they hired us. They asked us all kinds of questions. how would we take on such an investigation, what we would do, how long it would take, things of that nature. We spoke to several of the family members, and then we finally, at one point, I received a telephone call from Jonathan from the institution where he was incarcerated, and he interviewed us over the phone. And that was in 2012. As a result of that, the family had told us that at that time, they did not have the financial resources to hire us, but they said that they liked what we had to say and they would be calling us back. So it was about a year later, in March of 2013, we were contacted again by the family, and we were hired, and we started our investigation in April of 2013. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the case, but basically this Mr. Fleming was accused of killing Darrell Rush on August 15th, 1989, in the Williamsburg housing projects, not too far from here. Mr. Fleming had maintained the whole entire time that he had an alibi, and his alibi was that he was 1,700 miles away with his family in Florida. And he had plane tickets, hotel receipts, video, and still photographs of his family at Disney World to prove it. So the first thing that we did was to review all of the transcripts associated with all aspects of his trial. Pre-trial hearings, the trial, post-trial hearings, his appeal. We read everything. I guess it was about 6 weeks into the investigation that we started to realize that, hey, he's telling us the truth. There's something wrong here. So that only motivated us to go dig deeper and deeper. It took us 12 months. We went through, we traveled to multiple states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Puerto Rico to interview witnesses, to obtain affidavits, to take to the district attorney's office to prove our case. We worked over 1,000 hours on this investigation, and it took almost 12 months to the day that Mr. Fleming was exonerated by the Kings County District Attorney's Office and Ken Thompson. Mr. Fleming's case will be a case that will be talked about and studied by law students and legislators for generations. It has many issues that contributed to his wrongful conviction. It was flawed police work, and even more so than that, it was prosecutorial misconduct. Okay, what we found out during the course of our investigation, there were two key pieces of evidence, documented evidence on paper, that the DA's office presented to us that they had back in 1989 and failed to give it to his defense attorney. And that constitutes a breach of what's called Brady material. In a case in the United States Supreme Court in 1963, Brady versus Maryland, it states that when a prosecutor investigates and prosecutes a case and finds any evidence favorable to the defendant, they must release that information regardless of whether they believe the defendant is guilty. So the prosecutors had this information. One of the documents that I'm speaking of was a paid telephone receipt that proved that Mr. Fleming was in Florida hours before this homicide was committed. When Mr. Fleming was arrested, upon his return from Florida, he had that receipt in his pocket when he was arrested. It was confiscated by the police, and from that point on, nobody knows where it went until it was turned over to us by the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. During the course of the trial, a detective took the stand, and the detective was asked about the receipt, if he remembered it, if he had written notes about it, and he said that he could not recall any such telephone receipt. So to this day, we don't know where it was, but we do know that a copy of it worked its way into the prosecutor's file. And again, that information was never turned over to the defense attorney at trial. The second document that was produced was a letter from the Orlando Police Department where they were sent by the NYPD. They were requested to go to the hotel in Florida where Jonathan was staying with his family and conduct a canvass to see if anybody recognized him or remembered him being there at the time. And they interviewed 6 hotel employees, and 4 out of the 6 recalled him and his family being there at the time that this homicide was supposed to have taken place. And the Orlando Police Department did a written report to that effect, and they sent that report to the NYPD. And that also was never disclosed at trial by the prosecutor's office. So that's the sum and substance of what happened in this case. Once we're all done, we'll take questions. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Kim Anklin.
We are truly grateful to be with you today and to bring a little more awareness to this awful topic of wrongful convictions. It seems almost weekly, right, that we are hearing about another person winning their freedom for years of wrongful incarceration. As of last night, when I checked the National Registry of Exonerations, they had a count of 1,461. At the time of Mr. Fleming's exoneration, he was the 1,350th person officially exonerated in the United States since 1989. For those of you that are not familiar with the registry, what it is, it's a joint project between the University of Michigan Law School and the Center of Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University's School of Law. Their first report was only published June of 2012, and it covered convictions, the ones that they knew about. So their data was from January 1989 until February of 2012. And at that time, the count was 901. So what does that mean? That means since June 2012 until now, there have been 560 additional names added to the registry. Those additions are the ones that we're hearing more about, the newest cases, but they're also the cases that they have become more aware about and have added them. Each case, as you go through the registry, if you really are interested in this topic, I would start with the registry. And each case that you read about is a tragic story filled with irreversible damage and pain for all those involved. We refer to this group of people as the web of impact. And they include the person who was wrongfully convicted, and many times for many years, decades in Mr. Fleming's case, their families, their friends, the victim and his or her family who never got justice, the witnesses and the victims who mistakenly helped put the person behind bars wrongfully, the community who remained unprotected during all this time from the real perpetrator, and then also the future victims that will be brutalized or killed because the wrong person was incarcerated. Since Mr. Fleming is here with us today, we're very lucky to have him. I'm going to jump to like a human side to this story so that you understand how much of an impact this is. When I talk about the web of impact, I also want to include the defense team. And we as criminal defense investigators, we're fact finders. We keep a professional and somewhat cool demeanor in order to stay objective and to not allow for some pitfalls that has helped put the person away in the first place. Rarely do we become emotionally involved in our clients' lives, but in this particular case, we were hooked. This was one of those times. There was nothing more heartbreaking than to hear Jonathan Fleming's mother repeatedly recount and relive the details of when the jury came back with a guilty verdict. This was July in 1990. As I look around the room, probably many weren't even born then. So it's a very long time. But think about it from her perspective. Imagine, just after returning from Disney World, he was arrested and held at Rikers Island for almost a year. Even before the trial began, he was held almost a full year. And when the trial did begin, she was there every day. She listened to all the witnesses, and she saw all the evidence and lack of evidence that showed that he was innocent. She believed the jury was going to come back and do the right thing and acquit her son. So imagine hearing the jury reach their verdict, and that verdict was guilty. I've spoken with several people, and they have told me all that at that moment the courtroom erupted. And during the chaos, Mrs. Fleming fell to the floor, crawled through the guard's legs to desperately try to reach her son. She was screaming the entire time in utter shock and disbelief. After being let out of the courthouse, she told me how she walked all the way home sobbing and shaking. Strangers stopped her on the street, offered to take her home. She refused all of them, even though they were heartfelt offers. She said that no one could console her. She cried every day for so many years over losing her only son, her only child, now convicted for a murder he did not commit. Jonathan was ultimately sentenced to 25 years to life. During our time working with them, there were times when Jonathan's mother was the one that kept us going. Time and time again, she made us promise to fight for her son. She said seeing her son free was the only wish she had before she died. And if she did die, she made us promise to keep fighting for him. So yes, we became emotionally involved. Because you see, Mrs. Fleming was not just a mother who blindly believed in her son's innocence. She was with him in Orlando, Florida at the time of the homicide here in Brooklyn. Within the first 2 months, within the first 2 months of working the case, Bob and I proved to ourselves that Jonathan was innocent. That cold, just the facts way that we carry ourselves, it softened quite a bit. We knew they were telling the truth that they had been screaming for years. Then, a few months later, came a time when we knew that the district attorney's office knew Fleming was innocent because of what we uncovered. We cannot put into words the pain we felt over the next 6 months. We knew logically we needed to allow the new district attorney and his administration to get up to speed. But deep down in our guts, we were just as bewildered as to why he was still locked up. We had proven that he did not commit this crime. He was not responsible for the death of his friend. That was extremely tough. And then, one day, after we began our work, all the heartbreak, all the endless waiting gave way to what happened next. we finally learned that Ken Thompson, having taken office only 4 months prior, agreed the wrong man had served 24 years, 7 months, and 20 days for a murder he did not commit. That night, Bob and I, we had the honor to notify his family. And I'll have to tell you that nothing was more heartwarming than to make that call to Mrs. Fleming and say to her, Mrs. Fleming, it's over. Your nightmare is over. Your son is going to be produced tomorrow in Brooklyn Court, where you're going to hear a judge publicly say the words that will completely exonerate him. This time, her screams were of pure vindication. All the work, all the waiting, the strategizing with the lawyer, the sleepless nights, wondering what else could we do. At that moment, it was all worth it. And so, on April 8th, 2014, a year and a day that we began our work, not far from here, the world watched as Jonathan Fleming heard Judge Denick publicly vacate his conviction and tell him he was a completely free man. And after hugging his defense team, he turned and he ran and he hugged his mother. So that's the human side of these cases. And as you go into your prospective fields, remember that these are real people who are caught into this web of impact. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce to you Mr. Jonathan Fleming, exonerated.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. You know, it's a real emotional when I hear Kim and Bob talk about it. Thinking back what I had to endure. Just give me a second, I'll get it together. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming today. I'm very appreciative for this. To see that a lot of people is interested in wrongful conviction, because there's a lot of other men in prison as myself that's in there for the same thing. You know, as I put my life back together, I can only hope that more people will take interest in wrongful conviction. Unfortunately, I had to spend, like Kim said, 24 years, 7 months, and 20 days in prison for a crime that I had absolutely nothing to do with. No one knows what it's like being in prison for something that you didn't do. For many years, I reached out to lawyers, district attorney. I wrote every year. From the time I was incarcerated, and I told them that y'all have an innocent man in prison. And all I'm asking is that y'all investigate my case. For over 20 years, not one lawyer responded to any of my letters. The ones that did respond, it was all about money. They told me they needed money to even investigate my case, which was something I didn't have. Like Bob said, in 2012, I reached out to him. And I was skeptical about dealing with them, because during the course of my incarceration, I had 3 investigators before that. And all they did was just took the little bit of money that I had, but they never went out and did no investigation. Not one of them came to me with an affidavit. I told them what needed to be done, who needed to be spoken to, but not one of them came back with any results. When I did finally come along and I spoke with Bob and Kim, I told them that I didn't have much money. But if you would just look into my case, you would see that I'm actually innocent. I gave them just a retainer's fee just to read my paperwork. And I'll never forget, they told me, don't worry about the money. We're going to continue investigating your case, and we're going to do everything we can to help you get out of prison. That was the happiest day of my life, one of the happiest days of my life, because I knew that somebody was really going to look into my actual innocence. When Bob and Kim started doing the investigation, they talked to numerous of witnesses. I told them who they had to go see, and they actually spoke to a lot of people, and that's when they told me, they said, we believe in your innocence. We're going to do everything we can to help you get out. And because of these two fine people, and God put them in my life, is why I'm here today. The past 6.5 months hasn't been easy for me putting my life back together, because no one knows what it's like having 4 boys, having 4 sons, and not being able to raise them. My youngest son, my oldest son rather, the one that I actually took to Florida for his birthday, he was 9 years old at the time. He's 34 years old right now today. And he's been in jail since he's been 17 years old. And if I would have had the opportunity just to be out there to have a chance to actually raise my boy, he may not be where he at right now today. So that's something that I regret, because that opportunity was taken away from me. When I sit back and I think about the victim, he was a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And when I was accused of killing him, from where I grew up at, everybody knew that I had nothing to do with it, because they know he was a friend of mine. When the jury came back and found me guilty, I couldn't believe it. Not in my wildest dream I thought that they would find me guilty. But I never gave up. I knew that I would get out of prison. You know, I always used to tell my girlfriend, which I'm happy to say that she was with me in Florida when I went. It was me, my ex-wife, which I'm happy to say that we are together right now today, and we're going to get married again. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here. She had to work, and she really wanted to be here because this is my first time speaking. And hopefully when I do speak again, I won't be crying like this. All right. My mother was with me, my girlfriend was with me, and my 2 sons was with me.
Wait, can I speak your mother, your ex-wife and your girlfriend?
No, my ex-wife, she's my girlfriend now, but we get ready to get back married. My fiance, we're gonna get back married. She was with me. No, she was with me. And they was with me, and they knew I was innocent. I knew I was innocent. I never gave up. I always had faith. I said, I don't know why God put me here, but I'm gonna get out. And I fought every day, and I fought every day, and I was determined to get out. My mother told me, she said, I refuse to leave this earth until I see you walk out of these prisons. Unfortunately, my mother's not well. She's very sick, and I would have loved for her to have been here today, but she's not well. But she did get to see her only child walk out of prison. As for my boys, you know, that opportunity was taken away from me to help me raise them. The victim that I was accused of killing, his girlfriend, people don't know, he was a good friend of mine. His girlfriend was pregnant at the time, and unfortunately, that's another child that had to be raised without his father. I spoke with his sister. I've been home 6.5 months. His sister finally agreed to talk to me for the first time 2 weeks ago, because she just couldn't talk to me because she didn't know if I had something to do with her brother's death. But after talking to her, she's convinced that I had nothing to do with it whatsoever, which was a big lift off my shoulder because I really wanted to talk to her. Like I said, these past 6.5 months hasn't been easy, getting my life back together with my family. Today, I see the toll that it took on my family and everyone, and I'm just so grateful to have my mom's here with me right now today. You know, throughout my incarceration, now that I'm here with my mother and my wife-to-be and my loved ones, you know, it really took a lot of support, and they was always there for me. But like I said, if not for these wonderful people, I wouldn't be here. And I have them to really thank. There's no way I would be here if not for them, because no one wanted to listen to my case. I used to call them all the time, a lot of anger, because when they did their investigation in the month of November, I used to call them every single day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, wondering why am I still in prison, because they had the evidence to get me out of prison. It took 6 more months to get me out, and I was very angry. You know, a lot of people ask me why I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. You know, I try not to look back. I just want to move on. The people who actually even accuse me of this crime, I found it in my heart to actually forgive them. And I look forward to meeting them one day to let them know that I forgive them. Because the woman that accused me, about a week after I blew trial, she came back and she told the truth. She said that I didn't do it. But they refused to believe her story. They believed that her trial testimony was the truth. So I know she's living with a heavy heart. She had no idea I was still in prison when Bob and Kim went to go see her last year. So I look forward to meeting her one day. You know, I'll never forget the day before I was released. I was on the phone talking to Bob and Kim and my lawyer, and an officer came to my cell. No, he came to the phone actually when I was on the phone, and he told me to pack up my stuff. He said, "You're going down to court tomorrow. You may not be coming back." But I asked Bob and Kim, I said, "Listen, the officer just told me to pack up. I'm packing up to go to court. Do you know anything about it?" They said, "No, we don't." I said, "Y'all need to get on the phone and find out what's going on, because I hope they're not taking me down there for another case." You know, I was 8 days away from going to my first parole board. I had 25 years to life was my sentence. I was going to the parole board in 8 days. I knew they wasn't going to let me go, because the percentage of people going home with the type of sentence I had is maybe 2%. So I knew I wasn't going to go home. It was time that I told Bob and Kim that I wasn't even going to go to the parole board, because they were not going to let me go. I'm not going to go to the parole board and be able to show for remorse for a crime I didn't commit. Because when I go to the parole board, I'm going to tell them I didn't do it. And if you go to the parole board telling them that you didn't do it, they're not going to let you go. So I was thinking about not going. So they put together a parole package, and they convinced me to go. But that afternoon, after I talked to Bob and Kim, my counselor came to my cell, and she told me that she spoke to Kim. Kim said she made a phone call, and she said that I was going down to court, and I was going to go see a judge tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I was going to be released. That was the happiest moment in my life. I actually dropped to my knees, and I prayed to God, and I thanked Him, because I knew my nightmare was over, that it was really over, that I was going home. You know, I could never forget that conversation that I had with Kim, and the day that I walked into that courtroom on April the 8th, and I seen all of them standing there. I broke down then, because I really knew that it was really over. You know, I just want people to know that I know a lot of you have read my story, and y'all hear about a lot of innocent people in prison for crimes they didn't commit. A lot of people probably think about, yeah, you know, they all innocent, because that's what a lot of them always think. But there are a lot of innocent men in prison for stuff that they didn't do. No one should have to suffer for being incarcerated for a crime that he didn't commit. Not even 2 days, not even 24 hours. So just imagine 24 years, 7 months, and 20 days. I am so grateful to be here today. And as Kim told me, she told me the public, they really need to become educated and know that this can happen to anyone. A lot of you older women out here who have kids, grandkids, it can happen to them. Older gentlemen, it can happen to any of you young students, it can happen. You know? And Kim said we need to educate ourselves about this, and hopefully we can stop this from happening in the future. Whatever you do, students, whatever you do in life, I just hope you leave here today knowing, with the open heart, knowing all of you people just need to know that there are a lot of people in prison that's not guilty. And in your studies and cases and stuff like that, any of you that's in the field of studying cases, becoming lawyers, investigators and stuff, I just want you to know, just be bold, courageous, and if your gut is telling you that this person possibly may be innocent, don't let it be all about money. You make it save someone's life. I want to thank all of you for coming out, hearing my story, and I want all of you to have a blessed life. Thank you.
From the story that we heard, it was pretty clear that you were innocent. I'm really interested in what they accused you of, knowing you had proof, and they knew you were in a whole nother state. Like, what did they say?
Mr. Fleming had a fantastic alibi. And that's what convinced us to take the case. He was in Orlando, Florida. He produced plane receipts, hotel receipts, phone calls back and forth from Florida to Brooklyn. He had a fantastic defense case. So when you say, what is it? We would like to know that as well, because you can't be in two places at the same time. So it was a shocker to everybody when that verdict came in. And I believe, if I can just say a little bit, his case was tried in July of 1990. Also being tried at that time in Manhattan was the Central Park 5 case. The Central Park 5 case, I believe their trial went from June to August. Mr. Fleming's case was smack in the middle in July. The unfairness of our mayor at the time and Donald Trump bringing out these full-page ads that were calling for convictions into finding the Central Park 5 guilty. There was a culture at that time to just throw them away. And I believe that Mr. Fleming was caught up into that whole frenzy. Back in that time, there were over 2,500 homicides a year, and the public the public is our jury pools. So that they came in and they just really didn't, I don't think really paid much attention or were swayed one way or the other. There might have been a couple of jurors who did not believe in his guilt, but were pressured. So I hope that answers that part of the question. It's still a mystery.
Yeah, I remember your case very well. And the receipts in your pocket, I never knew you were convicted. Because I remember that you had those receipts and everything when this case broke. And I never thought, but I guess as she said, in the measure of the Central Park 5, you got lost in the middle. Because I never knew you were convicted. I was convinced you couldn't be convicted because you had the evidence.
So you remember the case from
when it happened?
Very
well.
Wow.
I remember him at the receipt, and I'm saying, there's no way that this man can be found guilty. I remember the whole thing. But what I want to ask, how can these people like the Attorney General, Hines, and all these prosecutors, how can they be held accountable for all the wrongs they have done? What can be done to make them accountable for what they have done?
You're asking a fantastic question. The way that our system is set up right now is that prosecutors are pretty much immune. Okay? Any other type of an attorney, a defense attorney, a contracts attorney, if let's say they commingle $200 of their client's money, they can become disbarred. There are people, and there are lawyers right now that have proposed legislation, and they actually brought it to the legislatures last July for a commission to be created for prosecutorial misconduct, whereby there is investigations that happen where we can explore what happened in the case. And if there is misconduct, that there are sanctions and possible disbarments that are brought down on prosecutors. And I think that's an excellent question, and that's the bigger picture that we need to consider. The one best part of Mr. Fleming's case is that he was convicted in the state of New York. There really is no cap on his compensation. Whereas we met a gentleman, 2 weeks ago, who was convicted in the state of Wisconsin, and he was let out after almost, 20 years, and they gave him 25.
He did 10 years.
10 years?
He did 10 years. He's been out 7 years.
And they provided him with $20,000 flat. And some states, there's no compensation. So that's another point
But
that...
you have to sue to get the compensation.
Yes, you do have to sue.
So, yeah.
Because I feel like my case should have been investigated years ago when I wrote the district attorney when Charles Hines was in office. I wrote him every year, and I never got a response. All I asked was for an investigation. I told them, I sent them a synopsis of the case, everything that took place, and all I asked was my case be investigated because you have a wrong man in prison. And they never picked up the case to actually investigate it. And it took Kenneth Thompson to come in office to release me. If Charles Hines was in office right now today, I don't believe I would be standing in front of you people.
Well, I'll have to make one caveat to that. In 2011, Hines did create a conviction integrity unit, and that unit's purpose was to reinvestigate claims of wrongful convictions. He is known, his administration is known for releasing David Renta. I don't know if you remember when he was released. Actually, Jonathan was in the same facility with David Renta. So I remember when that case hit in 2013 that this was the tip of the iceberg because that administration had been in office for 24 years. Our working with that unit, the few people that we worked with in that unit, John O'Mara and Jessica Wilson and Pat Lanigan, they were professionals, and they, I believe, knew, like we knew, he was innocent. But what happened was, the day that we got a confession down in South Carolina, Hines lost the election. And from that moment, everything shut down. So we'll never know. I can only imagine that we'd still be standing here hoping to get him freed, but the evidence was so strong at that point that we were pushing that if we didn't have something happen, we would then go to the media. So there was always something to play with, but we wanted to allow Mr. Thompson in and to do the right thing. And Mr. Thompson, you know, you have to give him credit. He's been in office 10 months and he's released 9. So, yes, ma'am. Deskovich? Yeah, it's a friend of his. Yes, he won the jury. He won the verdict of $41 million, and actually, Jonathan is friends with him.
He's a friend of mine. Matter of fact, it was his birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
It was his birthday yesterday.
It's a very tight group. Brady versus Maryland, and that was a decision in 1963 that said that any evidence that would be favorable to the defense must be turned over, even if they don't think it's worth anything. You have to turn this information over to investigators so that we can go investigate. That is the law. And it says that if you were caught hiding it, that the conviction is automatically vacated. But it's very difficult to prove hiding evidence when you got to think about it. How do we know it's hidden? And to Mr. Fleming's case, that's 2 pieces of paper along, but we had photographs, he had video of him laughing, date and time stamped, with his children in the parks. And we had plane tickets, and we had receipts. So, you know, for them to say, okay, we have one more piece, you know, it was just an astonishing verdict all the way around. But you're absolutely right.
What exactly was the prosecutor's defense? Because if they have all the evidence that he was not even available, did they try to accuse him of conspiracy or something? Like, what was their actual defense?
Prosecution had one eyewitness who testified that she saw the shooting. She later recanted, right after the trial, right before the pre-sentence hearing, she recanted, saying she was coerced by the prosecutor's office to say that. We were able to prove that during the course of our investigation. One of the things that we did after, I told you the first thing we did was to read the transcripts, the trial transcripts and all the hearings. The second thing we did was we went out to the crime scene and put ourselves in the spot of where the victim was killed in relationship to where the witness was. We took photographs and we took measurements of the distance between the two. And you got to remember, this homicide happened in the summertime at 2 o'clock in the morning. All right? The distance between where the victim was and where the eyewitness was 437 feet away. The eyewitness was in the second-story hallway of a housing development. It had 3/4-inch metal bars on the window. She told us, when she recanted, she told this story, and she told the same story to us. She was high on crack. She was smoking crack all day. She said she needed glasses for distance. She wasn't wearing them at the time. And all of this, we factored all of this in. And when we went out to the crime scene, I stood where the victim was when he was shot, and Kim stood in the window where the witness said she was at 10 o'clock in the morning. In April. And we couldn't see each other. I had to take out a pair of binoculars in order to see her in the window. So that's what he was convicted on, that sole testimony. And the woman later recanted, and gave an affidavit to us years later saying that she recanted. But that's the substance of his conviction. She did try and change her story. Now, I would assume that photographs, and there were crime scene photographs taken. I'm sure, I would assume that measurements were taken too, but maybe not, I don't know.
Here's the punchline on that issue. This woman, you've got to remember, the case happened August 1989. His trial doesn't start until July 1990. It's almost a year that goes by. By the time that she comes up to testify, first of all, they promised her that they really didn't need her. But by the time she comes to testify, or is ready to testify, or going to be testified, she's 7 months pregnant. So she was worked over from a pretrial hearing until the trial began, which is only about a day in between, and she said that she was threatened to have her baby in jail. So again, there's this leverage and this not only misidentification from eyewitnesses, there's witness coercion. And that's what you're seeing. And when you look at these cases, especially the Brooklyn Scarcella cases, you're going to see that there's a commonality, and that is one of the tactics that is used. So on that note, Mr. Fleming even feels that, as we feel, this woman was just as victimized because of what they pressured her into, and she is also in part of that web of impact because she's had to live all these years with this.
Nobody's looking to exonerate them. They have to, like Jonathan did. He has to reach out. They have to reach out on their own and get somebody, hire somebody, pay money for somebody to conduct the investigation.
And that is the key. It's the investigation. It's not necessarily giving an attorney a bunch of money. It's that in these cases you have to have newly discovered evidence. They don't want to hear the rehashing of what happened. They want new evidence, and that's what we provided.
What is the advantage to the prosecution for convicting an innocent person while obviously allowing the guilty person to go free somewhere?
Absolutely fantastic question. To what end do we do this? To what end? They got the wrong person in. The victim never got justice. We pay for someone to be housed and for all these years. He's going to come out. He's going to sue. I think you got to go back to the way that the system is set up, and the way that the system is set up is that prosecutors and cops, they get promotions and raises based on convictions, on arrests and convictions.
Not necessarily.
and that's where they lose sight. Instead of seeking the truth and seeking justice, they're trying to get the win. So we really do need to reevaluate how our system is. It's not a big football game that we're trying to score points to get the best team. The points are people's lives. He lost half of his life. Well, if you Google Jonathan Fleming, you're going to be, when he came to court and he was exonerated at 2:00 p.m., within hours, I was getting texts from people in Zurich and France, and this went global almost instantly because all the media was there. So it's out there. It's traveled several news cycles.
So I want to know, has anyone personally apologized to you? Has the city itself done anything for like recompense or anything?
He does have a lawsuit pending with the city and the state of New York, which we can't discuss for obvious reasons. His attorneys requested that we can't. Kim and I went to an investigators meeting, dinner, September? About a month ago. And the guest speaker was Kenneth Thompson, the Brooklyn DA. And he got up to speak, and he talked about his being elected in his term in office and the things that he wanted to do. And a lot of it was to this conviction integrity unit, to upgrade it, to put more staff and more resources into it, to make it better, to help investigate these cases. Jonathan was supposed to attend the dinner with us that night. Unfortunately, he couldn't. But Mr. Thompson stood up and he said in front of about 300 people that Mr. Fleming was an innocent man and we got it wrong. And there were attorneys in the room with us, and their jaws hit the floor because they said never have they ever heard a district attorney apologize for something like this.
So it's coming. It's coming. He'll get his apology one day. Yes, actually, which was interesting to us, the day that the exoneration occurred, we did check within a couple of hours to see his corrections record, and it disappeared. So it was almost instant that he just got deleted out of the system. So yes.
And he also got, documents that the judge signed when he vacated the conviction, stating that as well. But it's been removed.
With all the new technology, with the cell phones and everything, and I actually went with Bob and Kim to a restaurant. And I didn't even know about the new sinks and all that. And I was looking for the flush and everything. And I'm standing there, I don't know where it's at. And when I walked away, it flushed by itself in the water. So all this stuff it's amazing with this new technology. And I'm learning computers and everything. I'm working, and I'm learning how to work with the computers and everything. But it's difficult, but I'm getting it slowly but surely.
I just want to start by saying you are an impressive individual for holding hope for almost 25 years.
Thank you.
How does it feel to know that all of that hard work, just all of that work done to get yourself out of prison, how does that feel? Just how?
It feels amazing, Unfortunately, I had my first birthday May 1st, 3 weeks after I got out, and I'm 52, and I'm healthy, and if I could live to be 100 years old, I got another 48 years to go. So I still got a long life to live.